Hey folks, with patch 3.23, Star Citizen gets its first implementation of Master Modes, which rebalances all ships and gives us a new way to fly and fight with them. Along with this, we're getting the biggest weapon rebalance for ship weapons and capacitor gameplay since capacitors were introduced in patch 3.14. This has unlocked new and different weapon loadout options for bounty hunting, as well as new strategies for how to manage your capacitor in combat. So let's get into it. We're not going to do a deep dive on master modes in this video, but you can't get into new weapon loadouts and combat strategies without covering some of the basics. At a high level, you've got two different master modes for your ships. The SCM mode is your do stuff mode. It's where you have access to weapons, missiles, mining, salvaging, scanning, and perhaps most importantly, shields and countermeasures. The main downside of SCM mode is that you're limited to combat speeds, so around 100 to 300 meters per second depending on your ship. You can temporarily go a bit faster than that while boosting, but that's it. To unlock your full speed, you need to activate the Nav Master Mode, which is your travel mode. In this mode, you have access to your quantum drive, and most ships are able to fly 900 to 1450 meters per second, depending on size and role. Switching between the modes takes a few seconds depending on the size of your ship, and you will almost immediately lose the benefit of whatever mode you were in once you initiate a switch. So if you're in SCM mode and you initiate Nav mode, it takes a few seconds before you unlock the higher top speeds, and in the meantime you immediately lose access to your weapons and countermeasures, and whatever shields you have will get pushed into a storage buffer that gets redeployed when you go back into SCM mode. And conversely, if you're zooming along in Nav mode and switch to SCM mode, you'll pull a trillion Gs of brake force while you almost immediately slow down to SCM speeds, and whatever shields you had stored in the buffer will get redeployed to protect your ship in a few seconds. One nice thing is that getting hit by incoming fire doesn't pause your shields getting redeployed from the buffers, so you don't have to worry about that like you do when you're recharging your shields normally while in combat. The other nice thing is that weapon ammo, your shields, and your boost gauge respect your capacitor settings even while in Nav mode, so you can still effectively manage your capacitor while you're traveling in Nav mode. And this is good because combat is a lot harder now with significantly tankier enemies that stick together much closer and aren't afraid of welcoming you with lasers, bullets, missiles, and their own ship hulls. So you need to use everything at your disposal to come out ahead. Actively managing your capacitor is significantly more important than it was in previous patches, because the changes to the capacitor design made it so that you get a lot more benefit from having capacitors split between multiple systems than you did before. In the past, we'd almost always run 100% power to weapons, and only put power to shields when we needed to recharge, because escaping your enemies to recharge your shields was a free action that came with almost no risk. Now, most ships can't escape their enemies once they're in combat without taking some serious damage, so you'll get a lot more benefit from running some percentage of your weapon power to shields. What SIG has done is that they've greatly increased the benefit of having some power to the shields, while adding more diminishing returns to the top end if you were to max them out. For example, you get the same benefit in your shield recharge time going from 33 to 50% shields as you do going from 50 all the way to maxed. So unless you're not getting hit at all, you'll usually want to run at least a little bit of power to shields just to keep them recharging occasionally, and also for the extra damage resistance multiplier which will make them tankier to boot. Weapons, on the other hand, haven't received a significant diminishing returns nerf. In 3.23, it'll always take you about 8 seconds to fully recharge your magazines from empty, regardless of how much power you put to weapons. As you put more power to weapons, you'll linearly increase your maximum ammo pool and your ammo regen based on how much power you've put in. Fortunately, in 3.23, all ships have gotten significantly larger ammo pools, so you can play around with the capacitor a bit more. What I mean by this is that since you can fire for longer before running dry, you're more likely to run into a situation where you'll be naturally recharging ammo mid-combat. For example, when you're positioning yourself around your target to line up for a few more shots, or when you're trying to create space or avoid incoming damage to recharge your shields. Because of that, it lets you have a bit more freedom with your capacitor instead of just pinning it to max weapons all the time. The same is true for when you're on the back foot and you're managing your cap in a defensive scenario. You'll likely want to keep some power to the weapons at all times, even when recharging shields, so that you can keep trickling some ammo into your magazines. If you go with a mixed loadout of ballistics and weapons, you can amplify the passive recharge by giving even deeper magazines to the laser weapons. Plus, you can alternate which guns you fire to maintain pressure on your target while recharging ammo. I used to only have keybinds for maxing capacitors to different systems, but now I've taken advantage of that keybind that SIG gives us, which lets us hold a button to max a system, or just tap that button to give that system some incremental power. I almost always enter combat with some mix of capacitor between weapons and shields depending on the ship and what the enemies look like. For example, if things look like they'll be hairy, I'll opt for more power to shields until I remove some enemy DPS off the field. As for engines, having more power to engines will give you more performance, which can be helpful, but I feel like I can manage with the base engine power and the passive boost regen, since the passive regen amounts for all three systems have greatly increased in 3.23. I typically just make sure I enter SCM mode with full boost, and then just top off any consumed boost once I'm out of combat. That said, this is still very much early days of Master Mode's tuning, so I'm sure this will change as time goes on and ships and systems get further refined. That said, let's get on to the juicier part of the video, the guns. Yes, that's right, we finally have some weapon variation back in the game. And Ballistics got buffed with a lot more ammo than before, making them more viable outside of the couple of options we had previously. Most ballistic Gatlings now have more than a minute of firing time before running dry, and most ballistic cannons have over 2 minutes, which is a 2 to 5x increase depending on the weapon. It's true that the ships have also gotten more tanky, but ballistics feel like they're in a better state than they were in 3.22, especially if you're fighting small or medium-sized ships, where your ballistic ammo pool will last for many more fights than if you have to chew through the larger, tankier ships. Across all weapon types, it's actually pretty cool how they've added user choice. For the past couple years, weapons were mostly split between two ammo speeds, a slower cannon ammo speed with higher DPS, and the faster repeater ammo speed with easier aiming. In 3.23, we've got not 2, not 3, not even 4, but 10 freaking ammo speeds. I'm not gonna lie, I think they might have overdone it a bit. But let's break it down, shall we? We'll start with the ballistic weapons because they've got both the slowest and the fastest projectile speeds in the game now. Starting with the slowest, we've got rocket pods at 700 meters per second, which is the old cannon projectile speed, and it just gets faster from there. The Deadbolts, 80 series Gatlings, and C788 Combine all shoot ammo at 900 meters per second. The SW series repeaters, Tiger Strike Gatlings, and Apocalypse Arms Gatlings all shoot 1200 meters per second projectiles, and the GT series Gatlings, Sword series cannons, and Tarantula cannons all shoot 1600 meters per second projectiles. Then you've got your charge shot ballistics like the Sledge and Strife mass drivers, which shoot at 3000 and 5000 meters per second respectively, making it so you don't really have to lead your shot very much. But that's balanced by the fact that they only shoot after charging for a few seconds, and they shoot automatically at the end of that 3 seconds, so you really need to be on top of your aim and timing. On the laser weapon side, we start with my beloved attrition repeaters and the M-series cannons at 1000 meters per second, followed by the blue NDB repeaters, Omnisky cannons, NN-series cannons, and Quarreler cannons shooting at 1400 meters per second. Then we get our anti-fighter weapons like the CF-series repeaters, FL-series cannons, and Light Strike cannons shooting projectiles at a blazing 1800 meters per second, full auto. And then our fastest energy-based weapon shot is 3000 meters per second from the Singe cannons, which are currently only available on a bonded defender. Just like the mass drivers, they have a charge shot that shoots automatically when fully charged, so it's tricky and, quite frankly, tedious to use. But it is satisfying when you get it right, so there's that. The scatterguns got a nice little buff to their projectile speeds, increasing from 800 to 1000 meters per second for the ballistic and dominance laser scatterguns, and increasing to 1200 for the pyro bursts. I haven't had an opportunity to test these yet, but they've been given increased range as well to make them easier to use, although the shotgun nature of their pellets makes it so you really do want to be up close to get value out of them. I'll pin a comment after getting some testing in with them to see if they're any better. Distortion cannons and repeaters all have 1300 meters per second projectile speed, but distortion has been heavily nerfed in 3.23, so I don't suspect it'll see much use until it's revamped a bit. And distortion scatterguns still have low projectile speeds at 700, so I'd stay away from those. Lastly, I'll add the Vanguard specific weapons into this as well, because it's worth seeing what weapon types the Vanguard can match well with for its size 5 nose gun. The GVSR and MVSA laser weapons both shoot at 1000 meters per second, and the BRVS and CVSA ballistic weapons both shoot at 1200, so you do end up pretty limited if you want all your weapon velocities to match. Same as the non-Vanguard weapons, the Distortion EVSDs and ATVSs both shoot at 1300 meters per second, but I don't suspect they'll be useful this patch. Now that we have a high level breakdown, let's see what truly sets them apart. In general, a weapon with a slower ammo speed will give you more DPS than something with a higher ammo speed, with the trade-off being the slower projectiles are harder to aim and land shots with. But even with a given ammo speed, the weapons can now differ. Let's start with ballistics. Let's compare the 1600 meters per second GT series Gatlings, Tarantulas, and Sword series ballistic cannons. All have the same projectile speed and burst DPS, but they have different fire rates and amount of time they can fire before running out of ammo. The fire rate is inversely related to the maximum weapon spread and ammo firing time, so if you pick guns with higher rounds per minute, you end up having less overall damage output and potentially worse spread. So in this projectile speed group, the Tarantulas win. This relationship holds for all ballistic weapons with the same projectile speed and size, so I find myself always choosing the lowest fire rate ballistics for maximum damage. The only trade-off is the slower fire rate weapons almost always have a higher spread attack and decay, which I'm speculating has to do with how evenly dispersed the shots will end up within the cone of spread. Attack and decay are terms from audio engineering, and I am no expert, so if somebody understands this completely, please correct me and I'll pin a comment. But my thinking is that these faster fire rate weapons will have a worst possible spread, while having more shots concentrated towards the center compared to an equivalent weapon. Take a look at these imaginary heat maps I've made to illustrate my thinking. Again, this is my speculation, but this is also the only thing that makes any sense, otherwise you'd never want to use these faster fire rate weapons. For laser weapons, just like within ballistics, the burst DPS of guns with the same size and projectile speeds is the same. But once the guns need to recharge, you're into sustained DPS territory, which is almost always a more accurate representation of a laser weapon's DPS. And different guns can have different sustained DPS thanks to their energy efficiency. Laser weapons turn your ship's capacitor pool into damage, and some guns are more efficient and can create more damage for the same amount of capacitor. Laser repeaters always turn 1 point of cap into 1 point of damage, but laser cannons get more cap efficient as you go down to slower projectile speeds. The 1800 meters per second light strike cannons are the least efficient, making 0.8 points of laser damage per capacitor point. The 1400 meters per second Omnisky and N-Series and Quarreler cannons make 1.3 points of laser damage per capacitor point, and the 1000 meters per second Bearing M-Series cannons create 2 points of laser damage per point of cap, literally breaking laws of physics to manufacture whoop-ass. And like we mentioned before, all the laser repeaters, regardless of projectile speed, are creating 1 point of damage from a point of cap, so you can get a lot more efficient if you're able to land your shots with the slower cannons. Even within the cannons, the M-Series ends up 2.5 times more efficient than the light strikes. Because of this, I prefer repeaters if I want to use 1800 meters per second guns, but I prefer laser cannons for 1400 and 1000 meters per second guns. Omniskys and M-Series cannons absolutely slap, so those are the ones I'd recommend, although I'd recommend sticking with Omniskys until you're hunting the larger ships. The weapons with slower projectile speeds also have a lower max spread and higher ammo regen cooldowns than weapons with faster projectile speeds, but those regen cooldowns only vary from 0.25 seconds to 0.75 seconds, so they don't go up by half a second per weapon size like they used to. What does actually increase by weapon size is the range of your weapons. Other than scatterguns, the range of all weapons is defined by weapon size, so all size 1 weapons have the same 2k range, all size 2s have 2.3k range, and so on. While these expanded ranges are nice, you'll typically want to be around 1k from your target to land all your shots unless you're shooting at large size targets or targets that don't move much. Distortion scatterguns have 1400 meter range, all laser and ballistic scatterguns have 2000 meter range except Pyroburst, which have 2400 meter range, but again you'll want to be closer to targets to land your shots, and that matters even more for scatterguns due to their shotgun spread. There's a few more things I want to note about weapons for this video. The first is that the change in gimbaling. SIG is basically making it so that almost all guns are attached to gimbals, and gimbals don't decrease the size of the weapon that's attached to them. But as a pilot, you no longer have auto gimbals available to you, so you'll always have to manually aim your guns while flying. You can set it to manually gimbal, and your guns will sort of slightly lead your pitch and yaw input to help you extend a bit beyond your ship's maneuverability envelope. This also activates the precision targeting mode that increases the amount of aim assist and decreases your fire rate. I haven't really gotten much joy out of using this, and it even seems that Yogi has mentioned that they want to move the pilot further away from aiming the guns and more towards positioning the ship. So for now, I would mostly avoid this unless you're in a large team fight and are maybe using a turret. Another main thing I want to note is that SIG really seems to want to push us towards using weapons with multiple projectile speeds. They've added 8 new ammo speeds, while at the same time making changes to capacitor recharge and ammo pools to encourage mixed weapon usage. But they did this while also making it so that no ballistics and energy weapons have the same projectile speed. They could have easily enabled mixed loadouts that had matching ammo speeds, but they've specifically chosen not to, while also adding more weapon spray and a bit more fixed aim assist for pilots. Once you also take into account that they've updated the default loadouts for lots of ships to mix laser and ballistic loadouts with drastically different ammo speeds, it becomes more clear that SIG really doesn't want us to match our projectile speeds. I don't think they've put in all the systems to support that yet though. My opinion is that multiple different projectile speeds on a single loadout feels far too janky and imprecise, and having to aim my ship in 2 or more different spots for different weapon systems is annoying and takes away from the satisfaction of getting the enemy directly under my crosshair and laying into them with my full force. You can still line up all your shots at once, but it's only if you're basically headed straight towards each other in a joust. And wasn't getting rid of jousting one of the main drivers for creating master modes? It's all still a bit too unfinished. So for now, I mostly stick with non-mixed loadouts, but that's because of my hatred of multiple pips, or missing shots with an averaged pip. Oh, and speaking of pips, they've removed the option to start with the superior lag pip now that you have to bind a key to set the ship to a lag pip each time you get in, because, you know, having spare keys to bind settings to is something everyone has in Star Citizen. And if I come across a bit snarky, it's because some of these decisions just don't make any sense to me. If I'm always going to use a setting, let me set it. Don't make me waste keybinds on things that aren't active gameplay. But I digress. The last thing I wanted to mention about weapons is that the DPS between weapon sizes has changed so that going with larger weapons is now preferable over going with multiple smaller weapons on the interchangeable mounts. So for things like the Buccaneer and the Hornet, you get more damage out of a single size 4 on the back than you will by putting 2 size 2s on the turret, which is nice to see since the size 4 will also have higher range and more ammo in the case of ballistics. The same happens to the nose turret on the Hornet. It's better to get a single size 3 instead of 2 size 1s. That's a bit of a bummer for the arrow though, since a while back we used to be able to put a size 3 on the back instead of the 2 size 1s, and now that's going to cost it some DPS. This doesn't change things for the Reliance though, since their Toshima turret with 2 size 2s only goes up to a size 3 for now. But maybe that will change since the gimbal is a size 4 gimbal and it's not supposed to be downsizing in the new Master Modes world. But for now, 2 size 2 still beats a single size 3. 3.23 has made it hard to move components around due to cargo inventories and all ships being made too small to use, but fortunately they've also flattened many components so that you don't need to move them around too much. Shields have been normalized except for their component HP, and I really don't think it's worth the money to upgrade them just for that. Coolers still don't have any effect on anything, so you never need to change them. The main things you do need to change are power plants and quantum drives. You'll want to upgrade any stealth or competition power plants to a civilian or military grade power plant so you don't run into power issues. If you're trying to lift off a ship and it's acting sluggish or weird, it might be the power plant. You can overclock power plants in the power MFD to get past this temporarily, but when I did that, my ship ended up breaking down mid-combat, leading to my death. So I'd rather just buy a beefier power plant. For quantum drives, not much has changed. Atlas and Voyage are still great size 1 drives for getting around the verse, whereas military drives will still spool the fastest for getting out of combat. That might be even more worth it now, given that while you're spooling you won't have any shields. Grade A drives are the best, but honestly, any military drive is within a few % of any other military drive, so just get what's most readily available to you, especially now that moving components around is really annoying. I could probably keep going on and on and on here about random things related to combat, but I want to stop here since things will continue to change and I wanted to get this video out to hopefully help some people who are lost with the dramatic changes to weapons, ships, and capacitors. Just keep in mind, this is very much a work in progress, so if you run into things that annoy you or feel broken, just know that they're probably going to get adjusted. This goes for both balance issues as well as bugs, of which there are still a lot. For example, sometimes your weapons don't fire when you enter SCM mode and you have to turn them off and back on, or swap to nav mode and back to SCM mode again. But even through the bugs and issues, I made it to ERTs on the PTU, so the game is definitely playable, you just may need a bit more patience than before. I'll be updating my loadout spreadsheet as I get some more experience with the different ships and weapons, so keep an eye out for that as well. If you've got any questions, comments, or figured out anything cool about the weapons that I missed here, please let me know. You can find me in the comments, on Twitch, or in my Discord, so come by and say hi. Links are in the description. And as always, thanks for watching, folks. I hope you liked this video. Cheers.